March 12, 2022. The war had just begun to settle into its most volatile phase. Air raid sirens echoed through the cracked streets of Donetsk, and frontline positions shifted by the hour. Colonel Dmytro Kovalenko, a 43-year-old career officer and chief of internal counterintelligence for Ukraine's military, was last seen stepping into a convoy of 3 unmarked SUVs outside a gray government safehouse on the outskirts of Kramatorsk. He wore civilian clothes, carried a single rucksack, and made one brief call from a secured field device. The only words ever recovered from that call were, "Package confirmed, destination compromised, proceeding with ghost path." Then nothing. He was scheduled to arrive at a secure site in Kyiv 14 hours later. He never did. The convoy vanished somewhere along the E40 highway, a stretch regularly monitored by drones, traffic satellites, and NATO-linked radar. There was no footage of an ambush, no explosions reported. No transponders activated. Ukrainian command assumed enemy contact. But within 4 hours it became clear. There was no wreckage, no flares, no distress signal, nothing. The official line was "missing in action," but inside intelligence circles, the term used was cleaner: compromised. Kovalenko wasn't just another officer. He was the architect of an internal surveillance network tasked with rooting out Russian moles within Ukraine's own ranks. His disappearance came less than 72 hours before he was expected to deliver classified files directly to the Presidential Intelligence Committee, files rumored to contain the names of double agents operating at the highest levels. Files that, according to one senior aide, could have changed everything. His wife, a university lecturer in Odessa, said he had grown quiet and paranoid in the weeks leading up to his final mission. He stopped calling home. He sent encrypted messages that no one could fully decrypt. And then one day, he just disappeared into the war. No funeral, no farewell, just static and silence. And for 3 years, that silence remained absolute. It didn't take long for the rumors to start. A man like Kovalenko didn't simply vanish, not in daylight, not with escort vehicles, not on a monitored highway just 90 miles from the capital. Military satellite logs from March 12 showed something strange. Between 3:13 p.m. and 3:27 p.m., a 7-kilometer stretch of road just south of Svatov went completely dark. No heat signatures, no radar pings, no radio signals. A dead zone. The convoy entered that stretch on schedule. They never exited. Aerial reconnaissance found nothing. No blown-out husks, no scorched earth, no debris field. The road looked untouched, clean, almost staged. Some analysts suggested Russian electronic warfare units may have jammed the area, using the cover of a thunderstorm that had rolled in from the southeast. Others pointed to old Soviet tunnels rumored to crisscross the region, relics of the Cold War forgotten on official maps. But even those theories failed to explain one thing. Why no signs of struggle, no bullet casings, no broken windows, no blood? Within days, military command shut down the investigation, citing active combat instability. Off the record, senior officers were divided. Some believed Kovalenko had been captured by Russian GRU operatives in a precision snatch and grab. Others believed something more unsettling: he was never taken. He went willingly. One unconfirmed report claimed a UAV picked up heat signatures of a lone figure moving on foot through the tree line 5 kilometers west of the disappearance site, heading south, not north, toward enemy territory. Kovalenko had access to everything: internal surveillance logs, military movement schedules, the names of agents embedded in enemy zones. If he had turned, the damage would be incalculable. But there was no proof. No communications, no demands, no propaganda videos, just a blank space in a forested corridor and a man with too many secrets to be left alive. Ukrainian intelligence began quietly scrubbing files linked to him, locking down anything tagged under Syracuse, a codename no one officially admitted existed. His wife moved to Romania. His unit was quietly disbanded. And those who had once called him a patriot now avoided saying his name, because in war, some disappearances are just bad luck, but others are warnings. And this one was written in silence. Colonel Dmytro Kovalenko didn't officially exist on most military rosters. His public-facing role was limited to logistics and training operations in the Eastern Theater. But behind closed doors, he was running one of Ukraine's most sensitive shadow operations, an internal sweep designed to identify compromised assets within the Ukrainian defense establishment. The mission was off books, referred to only in fragments through codewords and initials. What began as a routine counterintelligence review ballooned into something far more dangerous. His team had uncovered inconsistencies, financial transfers, unexplained travel records, unlogged satellite phones. Then came the disappearances: a deputy in logistics, a naval intelligence analyst, a colonel in communications. All dead, all in apparent accidents. Kovalenko didn't think they were accidents. He compiled everything: dates, names, coded transcripts, and placed them under a single heading: Operation Syracuse. It wasn't officially sanctioned, but he had the reach to make it real. In late February 2022, he requested an unscheduled briefing with Ukraine's highest-ranking defense officials. He insisted it be conducted in person. No digital transmissions, no remote links. The file would be hand-delivered. The meeting was set for March 14th. He vanished on the 12th. The timing wasn't just suspicious, it was surgical. According to one field officer, Kovalenko had grown increasingly paranoid in the final days before the mission. He switched vehicles mid-transit. He insisted on analog maps. He stopped speaking to his deputy entirely. At one point, he slept inside a reinforced generator room beneath a secondary base near Sloviansk. Convinced his usual quarters were being monitored. He wasn't wrong. Intelligence later discovered a compromised listening device hidden inside the HVAC system of his operations center, wired to a dormant satellite dish believed to have been abandoned since 2018. When his disappearance was confirmed, the top brass scrambled. The file his entire case was missing with him. Paper copies, flash drives, even his encrypted notebook were never found. A single printout surfaced weeks later in a burned-out checkpoint near the Seversky Donets River, charred at the edges. It showed one name, redacted, with the caption, "Active inside unverified." That was the last trace of Operation Syracuse, and the first sign that whatever Kovalenko had uncovered, someone had already buried. The war pushed forward. Borders shifted. Cities fell and were retaken. But in the background, a shadow moved with quiet precision. For 2 years after Kovalenko's disappearance, his name was never mentioned in official briefings. Internally, though, the chatter never stopped. In intercepted Russian comms, NATO signal analysts began noticing repeated references to a figure known only as the Hawk. The context was always vague, always coded. Hawk breached, one transmission said. Hawk location changed, assets secured. Another described Phase 3 Hawk cannot surface, secure shadow corridor. Initially, it was dismissed as just another GRU asset codename. But when cross-referenced with past Ukrainian codenames, one document linked the Hawk to Kovalenko's prior deep field assignments. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to start a whisper chain inside GUR headquarters. Had he been turned? Was he a prisoner? Or had he gone so far off-grid that no one, not even his allies, knew what side he was on? A Belarusian defector brought the story closer. In early 2024, he claimed Kovalenko was being held at an underground site east of Rostov, a black facility known only by its initials, KV4. He described a gaunt man, rarely spoken to, heavily guarded, subjected to rounds of chemical interrogation. But the story unraveled under scrutiny. He couldn't describe Kovalenko's face. He never knew his rank. Still, the seed had been planted. 6 months later, A separate tip arrived from a Georgian intelligence contact embedded in southern Russia. He had seen someone resembling Kovalenko being escorted by masked operatives outside a Ministry of Defense installation. The man was thinner, slower, but walked like a soldier. When asked how he knew, the source replied, "You never forget the way an officer scans a room." None of it could be verified. No photos, no DNA, no communications, just shadows trailing rumors. But inside a sealed analysis brief buried within Ukraine's internal archives was a single annotation scrawled in red pen. "If Hawk is active, Syracuse is not over." The problem was, no one knew what Syracuse had been meant to expose. And if Kovalenko was still alive, the bigger question remained, why hadn't he made contact? Or worse, who was keeping him from it? November 2nd, 2025. Just after sunrise, a farmer in the Kharkiv region brought in an old Soviet-era tiller to clear debris from a disused property he'd inherited. The barn had collapsed in on itself, overtaken by vines and time. As the blades hit the ground near the eastern wall, the engine stalled, followed by a deep echo under the soil. Not a rock, a cavity. Authorities were called. Within hours, the 92nd Mechanized Brigade arrived with ground-penetrating radar. Under 18 inches of concrete and steel plate, they found a hatch, circular, pressure-sealed, and unmarked. What they found beneath it would stop the investigation cold. A narrow service tunnel, reinforced with lead shielding, ended in a small chamber. Parked inside was a mud-caked Mercedes-Benz E350 Cabriolet, a 207 chassis, with military-tinted windows. It matched the description of the car Colonel Dmytro Kovalenko had last been seen driving, registered under a Ministry of Defense alias. It had vanished in March 2022. The vehicle's tires were flat. The front fender was scratched, but the car was intact. Inside, the cabin had been stripped of any electronics. No phone, no tablet, no satellite tracker. The glove compartment was locked with a magnetic clasp, and inside was a blank notepad except for a single number scribbled on the back page, 223V. Analysts would later trace the code to an abandoned file label from Operation Syracuse. There was no power to the tunnel. The security cameras inside the entry chamber were analog, older than the war, but wired to a power system that had been manually disabled. The barn itself didn't appear on any property records or military maps. It had been listed as destroyed in an artillery strike during the 2022 Kharkiv offensive. But the ground showed no signs of cratering, and the concrete over the hatch had been poured in 2023. The vehicle was airlifted to a secure compound outside Kyiv. Forensics began working immediately. There was no blood, no damage. Just a single smudge of red clay under the accelerator soil, native, not to Kharkiv, but to Luhansk. Whatever this place had been, it wasn't just storage, it was staging, and someone had gone to great lengths to make sure it stayed hidden. What began as a vehicle recovery quickly spiraled into something else. Beneath the Mercedes chamber, a secondary tunnel extended westward, out of line with the original floor plan. It ended at a reinforced blast door, triple-bolted, etched with a number, KV-4. Behind it, military engineers found a Cold War fallout shelter long forgotten by modern records. But this wasn't a relic. Someone had upgraded it. Biometric scanners had been installed, retina, fingerprint, and voice. A satellite dish, rigged through a shielded coax line, was hidden beneath the barn's weather vane. The air filtration system was custom-built with military-grade HEPA modules and CO2 scrubbers. There were 2 rooms, one designed as a command node, the other as a sparse sleeping chamber. But both had been cleared, stripped with care, not ransacked, removed. On the sleeping cot sat a half-used ration pack, still warm when investigators found it. A torn topographical map was pinned to the wall, with red markings circling a location inside Zaporizhia's exclusion corridor. The coordinates matched no active base. Taped to the edge of the desk was a small strip of paper, curled with moisture. A number, a single Ukrainian phone number, disconnected since 2022. Dust analysis showed activity in the shelter within the last 10 days, but the logs manual or digital had all been erased. Power cables were clipped, and the emergency generator had been flooded intentionally. Fingerprint analysis on the desk, the light switch, and the map confirmed at least one set: Colonel Dmytro Kovalenko. Whoever had built or used the shelter knew what they were doing. No personal items, no digital trails, no biological residue, just the faint smell of disinfectant and the lingering hum of something unfinished. Military intelligence cordoned off the site. Surveillance was placed on the barn within hours. The entire recovery team was reassigned under sealed orders. One analyst, reviewing the heat logs, whispered a phrase, later redacted from the report. He was living here, watching something. If Kovalenko had used this place as a hideout, the question was no longer where he'd gone. It was why he came back, and what he left behind. The Mercedes had been picked clean. No obvious electronics, no trackers, no paperwork, but wedged deep beneath the driver's seat, inside a rusted ammo pouch, investigators found something unexpected: a sealed military-grade laptop, a blood-stained ID card belonging to Colonel Kovalenko, and a metal-encased USB stick. The flash drive was etched with a single word: Syracuse. The ID card wasn't standard issue. It was older, laminated by hand, and smeared with dried blood along the lower edge, enough for DNA extraction. The blood was Kovalenko's. Confirmed. The laptop was encrypted and immediately sent to the forensics division in Kyiv. But once cracked open, the hard drive revealed nothing. It had been wiped with zero-fill protocols used by NATO clearance teams. Not Russian, not civilian, intentional. All hopes turned to the USB. Inside were 3 folders, each filled with heavily redacted text files, satellite imagery, and audio fragments corrupted by time and compression. For days, analysts rebuilt them, line by line. What emerged was chilling: partial transcripts from what appeared to be an unauthorized surveillance operation conducted not on foreign agents, but on Ukrainian military personnel. The names listed weren't random. They were high-level, some still active, others marked deceased. One general had died in a helicopter crash just outside Dnipro. Official cause: mechanical failure. A second, a logistics officer, was found drowned in his apartment bathtub, his autopsy marked inconclusive. A third was still working inside Ukraine's Defense Procurement Division. His name was underlined twice. Each file cross-referenced with Node D, interior penetration. And, at the center of the web, tied to each incident through travel records, call metadata, or field dispatches, Kovalenko. He wasn't just investigating moles, he was building a case. Slowly, quietly. And then, suddenly, he vanished. The most complete document in the archive included time-stamped surveillance logs from a base outside Mykolaiv. One of the logs ended with an encrypted tag used only by the president's personal security detail. Whatever Operation Syracuse had uncovered, it had reached beyond tactical concerns. It had gone political. And whoever knew that, knew they had to stop him. Before it was a code name, Syracuse was just a word scratched in the margin of a notebook found in Kovalenko's old office, circled twice. Later, it became something darker. According to internal GUR archives, Operation Syracuse had no formal authorization, no tasking order, no oversight. It began with a single anomaly: a delayed arms shipment, flagged by Kovalenko in 2021. What should have been a routine audit turned into a chain reaction of inconsistencies, misrouted convoys, ghost payments, invisible cargo. Rather than escalate through formal channels, Kovalenko opened a quiet probe. He formed a 3-man shadow team, 2 analysts, 1 signals technician, and built a map of irregularities. The deeper they went, the worse it got. Not smuggling, not incompetence, Leaks. Precision-level intelligence leaks that only someone inside Ukraine's own command structure could have coordinated. The files recovered from the USB revealed how far it reached. Internal memos between colonels who'd never met, logistics chains that made no strategic sense. Surveillance targeting Ukrainian officers by foreign drones hours after they'd changed locations. Someone wasn't just leaking coordinates, they were guiding crosshairs. Syracuse was Kovalenko's response. A black archive of intercepted calls, decrypted emails, drone footage, and facial recognition logs all stitched together by hand. One fragment from an intercepted VoIP call linked a deputy defense minister to an offshore bank account in Cyprus. Another showed encrypted traffic routed through a server in Rostov just moments after a Ukrainian communications hub suffered a critical outage. By late February 2022, Kovalenko had gone silent even to his own team. He stopped transmitting updates. He started moving alone. According to one encrypted note found on the USB, he had narrowed his suspect list down to 3 primary vectors. The file's final page was corrupted, missing entirely except for the last line, typed in red font at the bottom. The real threat isn't outside the border. There was no signature, no date, just the ghost of a sentence meant to warn someone, or accuse someone. The shelter hadn't just been a hideout. It was a fail-safe. A dead man's vault for a truth too volatile to surface through official channels. And now, 3 years later, that truth was starting to seep through the cracks. In December 2023, Ukrainian cyber analysts scanning open-source Russian traffic flagged something strange. A low-resolution surveillance image from a Moscow military logistics hub buried inside an internal contractor leak. At first glance, it was just another security still, time-stamped, gray-toned, nondescript. But the man walking through the gate, head down, flanked by 2 escorts, bore an uncanny resemblance to Colonel Dmytro Kovalenko. The gait, the posture, the scar on the left cheek, all matched. But the image had no metadata trail, no facial ID tags, no reason to exist unless someone wanted it found. When shown to his former team, reactions were split. Some said it wasn't him. Too thin, too slow, too unsure. Others swore it was. One whispered, "That's his walk. I'd bet my life." The facility in question, a logistics annex near Koroshevsky district, was known to house a GRU-linked think tank, not a place you stumbled into by accident. He was either escorted there or belonged there. The debate fractured even further inside military intelligence. One camp believed he'd been captured and turned mentally broken through prolonged isolation or psychotropic conditioning. Another suggested the opposite. Kovalenko hadn't been caught. He'd inserted himself, gone dark on purpose, embedded inside Russian infrastructure to complete Syracuse from the inside out. Deep cover, but there was no follow-up. No second sighting. No chatter on Russian channels. Just that single, ghosted image. The fact it had leaked at all raised new questions. Was it bait? A message? A misdirection? Analysts dug into satellite archives trying to match his trajectory. Nothing. The trail ended at the gate. For those who had known Kovalenko best, the question wasn't just whether he'd survived, it was whether he had crossed a line no one was meant to cross. Not between borders, but between identities. Between loyalty and necessity. If he was alive, he knew they'd be watching. If he was turned, the damage could already be done. And if he wasn't, if this was all smoke, then someone out there was playing a long, dangerous game with a dead man's face. Buried inside the Syracuse flash drive, analysts found a file folder simply labeled Index. It contained a spreadsheet unformatted, stripped of metadata listing 27 codenames. No ranks, no roles. Just aliases and location tags spread across Ukraine, Poland, Germany, and 2 unknown entries marked OP node with no geographic data. The implications were immediate. Cross-referencing began at once. Within days, 5 of the names were matched to confirmed deaths, 3 in non-combat incidents, 1 in a helicopter crash, and 1 in what had been ruled a suicide inside a Kyiv hotel. 2 other names were linked to unresolved disappearances dating back to late 2022. Both men had served in Ukraine's Cyber Defense Command. Both were declared AWOL. Neither had ever resurfaced. The remaining entries were harder to decode. 3 of the code names, Crown, Glacier, and Volt, were linked to individuals currently serving in sensitive military and political posts inside Kyiv. The discovery triggered a quiet internal security review. No formal charges, no press briefings, just silent reshuffling and locked offices. One of the flagged individuals left the country within 48 hours. Destination unknown, but the most disturbing entry was a partial match. Codename Ember. The line next to it was redacted even in the raw file. The redaction wasn't a glitch. It was deliberate, with embedded metadata indicating it had been hidden by an encrypted toolset used exclusively by NATO-aligned field intelligence. When decrypted, Ember's location pinged once April 2022 inches, a suburb outside Rostov, and one more time, months later, at a classified Ukrainian operations facility in Lviv. The tag on the entry was even more cryptic, activated via strain 3. No one could explain what that meant. Theories ranged from a recruitment protocol to a psychological conditioning program. Nothing was confirmed. But the file's margins had a line written in Kovalenko's own hand, marked in faded pencil. Some names we don't protect. We contain them. Whatever the list represented, traitors, operatives, or something else, it wasn't just an inventory. It was a map, a network, and someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to scatter its pieces before the final connections could be made. The final lead came from a corrupted folder nested within the SYRQ's drive coordinates, buried beneath layers of scrambled hex code. Analysts decoded it over weeks, eventually narrowing it to a sector near the Zaporizhia front, inside an abandoned mining complex once used to shelter mobile artillery in the early months of the war. On November 18, 2025, a 6-man Ukrainian reconnaissance team moved under cover of darkness, equipped with zero-emission drones and biometric scanners. The area had long been written off as inaccessible, rendered structurally unsound by constant shelling. It was the perfect place to hide something no one wanted found. Beneath the surface, inside a collapsed service tunnel, they found it, a narrow chamber reinforced, active. Fresh boot prints lined the dust. Heat signatures were faint but recent. In the center of the room stood a single hardened terminal, connected to a power cell, still running. The team secured the site and activated the display. A single video file played, grainy, dated November 4, 2025. The feed showed a man seated in a reinforced chair against a bare concrete wall. His hair was longer. He looked thinner. His uniform was stripped of insignia, but his posture was unmistakable. Colonel Dmytro Kovalenko, eyes alert, voice clear. "If you're watching this," he said, pausing, "it's not over." No further context. No timestamp embedded, just static at the end, and the whir of a ventilation fan spinning somewhere off camera. The footage had been recorded 2 weeks prior, long after the shelter near Kharkiv was discovered, meaning one thing: Kovalenko had been alive. And he was still moving. The team swept the site. No signs of struggle, no blood. But the backup generator had been deliberately sabotaged. The escape route, a narrow crawl space behind the storage lockers, led to a blocked exit freshly collapsed. Not by nature, by charge. A second terminal was found wiped clean, but behind its frame was a hand-scratched note on torn ration packaging. "They're inside already. Look west, look down." It wasn't clear if it was a warning or misdirection. But command pulled the team within hours. The site was reclassified, buried. Another sealed echo chamber for a voice that refused to vanish. And a war that had just changed its shape. The official statement came quietly, 2 paragraphs buried inside a government press release on military reassignments. As of November 22, 2025, Colonel Dmytro Kovalenko was declared Kia, killed in action, presumed deceased during an unauthorized operation in 2022. There was no funeral, no remains, no moment of silence, just a bureaucratic period placed at the end of a sentence no one could read. But behind the silence, the gears were still turning. The Kharkiv shelter was sealed and placed under round-the-clock surveillance. The bunker near Zaporizhia imploded. Operation Syracuse, along with all linked files, was sealed indefinitely under Presidential Directive Z4. Only 5 individuals retained access. None of them would speak on record. Inside the intelligence community, the lines blurred. Some called Kovalenko a defector, a man who crossed too far into enemy lines and couldn't find his way back. Others insisted he had gone underground by design, shielding Ukraine from a cancer rooted deep within its own structure. He saw the breach, one operative said off-record, and the only way to stop it was to disappear. No evidence confirmed either version. The footage from the Zaporizhia bunker vanished shortly after review. The terminal housing, it was destroyed in a fire of uncertain origin. The investigation was never reopened, but rumors clung to the silence. Soldiers on the southern front claimed their communications had been quietly encrypted weeks before an intercepted strike. Others said they'd received anonymous tips through ghost networks maps that led them out of kill zones, names that hadn't appeared on any roster. The messages were signed only with one word, Syracuse. His wife never held a service. She never changed her voicemail. She still left the porch light on. 3 years after a colonel vanished, all that remained was a list of unanswered questions, a trail of erased footprints, and a war that had grown too complex for heroes or traitors. Just decisions made in the dark, by men with too much access and too little time. Whether Kovalenko was dead, alive, turned, or something else entirely, one truth remained. His disappearance wasn't random. It was engineered. And whatever he found out there, someone still doesn't want you to know. This story was brutal, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.